Alright, so I decided to break out my trusty GoPro camera to give you some lectures. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off at the end of chapter 7 where we left off. So we were talking about the hormones produced by the anterior pituitary. So the next one in line is prolactin. And prolactin is going to stimulate milk production in the female. Remember I said that oxytocin is the letdown hormone, so it allows the milk to actually go into the duct so that it can make its way to the nipple. So the blood levels typically rise at the end of pregnancy, so both of those hormones start increasing in levels, and that actually causes the leakage of milk, typically very close to pregnancy. We talked about the different types of pathologies that you have in the endocrine system. So it typically either involves either too much hormone, too little hormone, or problems with the receptor, which is what is referred to as transduction abnormalities. We already mentioned what testicular feminization is. There's also a disorder called pseudo-hypoparathyroidism, and that's actually caused by a defective G protein signaling pathway. And there's also other abnormalities and many different control mechanisms that I don't have time to get into. So one of the things that I want you to be able to do for the exam is to be able to figure out where exactly the defect is. And you can see the defect can either be in the hypothalamus, the pituitary, or within the target organ itself. So in the anterior pituitary, you have 6 different hormones that are being produced. In the hypothalamus, you also have the corresponding releasing or inhibiting hormones. And then typically at the end organ, you're going to have whatever hormone is being produced. So in the case, for instance, of thyroid stimulating hormone released by the anterior pituitary, you're going to get the release of thyroxine by that particular gland. In the case of the adrenal gland, the adrenal cortex produces cortisol, so you can either have a tumor in the gland itself in the pituitary or within the hypothalamus, and you can actually see how the different locations of those tumors give correspondingly different levels of hormones. All right, so the pineal gland is another gland located within the brain. It actually controls the production of melatonin, which is known as the darkness hormone. You actually get light going through the optic nerve directly into the suprachiasmatic nucleus of the hypothalamus, and that then sends a signal to the pineal gland to regulate the production of melatonin. And melatonin is derived from tryptophan. So typically a number of different processes are controlled by what are called circadian rhythms, and that typically is going to be tied with light. So there are a number of different hormones that help to regulate those pathways. So you can see here the brain, the pineal gland is located right back there, so it's got connections to the hypothalamus as well. You can see the circadian clock is located within the suprachiasmatic nucleus, and things like production of enzymes that regulate your cholesterol production, your blood pressure. So different hormones have different circadian effects, and typically like cortisol is released early in the morning. Typically around 6 a.m. you start getting increased production of it, and that actually allows you to get ready for your day. It increases your blood pressure as well as your blood sugar level. So all of these processes occur for particular reasons that allow you to maintain homeostasis. So melatonin, when you lack that hormone, particularly if you're not exposed to light, it can give you a disorder known as seasonal affective disorder, where you actually get depressed. And one of the treatments for that is actually exposure to light, particularly early in the morning. So when people don't have enough light exposure, it can actually affect their mental well-being. So this gives you an idea, the darkness hormone, so it's typically produced more after midnight, derived from tryptophan. I don't want you to know or have to remember the structure of it, but just know what gland produces it, and typically it's produced at night. And there are various applications, like when you're traveling in particular, you often experience jet lag. And one of the things that they're trying to do is, for instance, in New England Journal of Medicine, they came up with different techniques that potentially would allow you not to have as bad of jet lag as you would if you do these activities. And that can include exposure to light at certain times. And they're actually trying to come out with a pill that could help you get over the jet lag very quickly, as opposed to having to wait a few days before your body is able to adjust on its own. All right, so that's the end of chapter 7. So the next chapter that we'll go into, chapter 8, is going to deal with the nervous system, and we'll talk about the different blood-brain barriers. So we'll get into what is found in the central nervous system, and then go on from that, and that'll then be the last chapter before the next test. So that's the end of this lecture.